Hey, I'm spending $40,000 on a cruise, so you better cover it.
What do you mean by a cruise? And $40,000? What are you thinking? Instead of feeling guilty for leaving on his own, Kenny told me he was about to go on a lavish cruise and wanted me to pay for it.
This ship is incredible. The amenities are like a luxury hotel, and there's even a shopping mall on board.
Suddenly realizing what was happening, I checked my credit card, only to find out that Kenny had already taken it. Kenny had the audacity to steal my card. His arrogance had been unbearable for a long time, but this time, I just couldn't forgive him. I couldn't tolerate Kenny's blatantly unreasonable behavior any longer. I've just canceled the card, and we're done. I filed for divorce.
Huh? Stop joking around. There's no way you're divorcing me. If anyone's leaving anyone, it would be me.
Even at this point, Kenny still thought divorce was impossible and believed he was above me. If that's what he wants to think, let him. It wasn't until some time later that Kenny, who had been so smug, started panicking and begged for my forgiveness. My name is Emily. I'm the secretary to my grandfather, who is the CEO of a major corporation. My grandfather is a strict man, even with me, his granddaughter, when it comes to work. He taught me many things from a young age.
People tend to envy those who have money. You shouldn't go around telling everyone that you have a family member who is a CEO.
My grandfather especially feared others' jealousy, and he always emphasized this to me. Although my family was quite wealthy compared to others, I followed my grandfather's teachings and kept our status as wealthy people a secret, even from close friends. I lived a simple, modest life, but at one point, I met someone who changed my life. I fell in love at first sight with Kenny, a fellow student at my university. Kenny was very popular with the ladies, thanks to his good looks and friendly demeanor. Being shy and inexperienced with men, I thought I could never be a match for him, and kept my feelings hidden, secretly longing for him for years. However, I couldn't suppress my feelings for Kenny any longer, so I confessed my love to him, even though I was ready to be rejected. I was sure I'd be turned down, but to my surprise, he said yes. I was over the moon. I never imagined we could become a couple. After Kenny and I started dating, I began to be talked about behind my back by the women who were interested in him. But whenever I felt down, Kenny would always say to me,
Looks don't matter. I love who you are inside. Emily, don't worry about what others say.
after receiving his encouragement, I decided not to let anyone's words hurt me anymore. And after we graduated, we got married and began living together. After graduating from college, I joined my grandfather's company for training. Kenny also joined the same company, and being as capable as he was, he quickly made a name for himself in the company, even without the status of being the grandson-in-law of the founder. A few years into our marriage, my grandfather passed away, and soon after, my father, who had taken over as CEO, was diagnosed with a progressive illness. Despite our family's hopes for his full recovery, My father's condition was very serious. And just 6 months after his diagnosis, my father passed away. I can't believe Dad's gone so soon. It's just not fair. Kenny held me as I broke down in tears at the funeral. The sadness was almost unbearable. But I couldn't afford to stay down forever. My father's death meant that I would be the new CEO.
I'll do anything I can to help. I'll keep supporting you, Emily.
With those reassuring words from Kenny, I gradually recovered from the grief of losing my father. About 2 months after my father's death, I was named the new CEO of the company, and Kenny, who had proven himself, became the executive vice president. I truly am glad I married Kenny. I fought so from the bottom of my heart. However, something happened that shattered our happy everyday life. It was then that I realized everything I'd thought about my life was a lie. Since becoming executive vice president, Kenny had been doing whatever he wanted. He'd invite young female employees to dinner and even exchange contact information with those who were engaged. Hey, Kenny, what the heck has gotten into you? Your reputation since becoming executive vice president is really bad. You have a wife, and yet you're fooling around with other women. What's going on?
Don't get so mad. I'm just doing my job as an executive. Look, young women often have things they want to say but can't. So I take them to dinner and listen to their concerns. That's all.
Kenny made no effort to hide his reckless behavior, and whenever I confronted him about his relationships with other women, he'd shamelessly make excuses. I couldn't do anything about Kenny, even though he wasn't the person he used to be, because there was no concrete evidence of cheating. All I could do was advise him to be more conscious of his role as executive vice president. Amidst all this, our wedding anniversary was approaching. It had become a tradition for us to have dinner at our favorite restaurant every year. Looking back, I realized I might have been too caught up in work and neglected our time as a couple. If that was why Kenny had started acting out, then we needed to have an honest talk. I wanted us to go back to being the happy couple we once were if possible. Dinner at the restaurant seemed like a perfect opportunity for that. But my hopes were shattered by Kenny. On the day of our anniversary, our work schedules didn't line up, so we were each supposed to meet at the restaurant. I rushed to finish work and was able to arrive at the restaurant in time for the reservation. After giving my name to the clerk and being seated, I waited for Kenny to arrive, but even after the reservation time had passed, he didn't show up. Everyone around me was there as couples or with their spouses, and I was the only one sitting alone, feeling completely out of place. Worried that something might have happened to him, I called Kenny, but there was no answer. In the end, unable to eat alone, I apologized to the staff, paid the cancellation fee, and left the restaurant. Feeling anxious about what might have happened, I called Kenny again, and he finally answered. "Oh, I finally got through. Kenny, where are you right now?"
Where I am doesn't concern you, does it?
"Today is our anniversary, and I told you I made a reservation at our usual place. I waited for you, but you never showed up, so I canceled."
Was it? Huh? I forgot.
What?
It's fine. I'm busy right now.
Busy? Where are you, and what are you doing? As I listened to the call, I noticed a lot of background noise.
Geez, it's noisy. I'm checking out a place to use for a business meeting.
According to Kenny, he was at a high-end club that he planned to use for client entertainment.
It's part of building relationships with clients. It's work, so stop nagging. Later.
Wait a second, we're not done talking. Ignoring my words, Kenny abruptly hung up on me. Unbelievable. What is he thinking? All dressed up for our anniversary, I felt humiliated being dismissed by my husband like that. Depressed, I returned home and waited for Kenny, ready to give him a piece of my mind, but even as midnight came and went, he never came back. The next morning, when I walked into the living room, there was Kenny asleep on the couch without even taking a shower. Hey, wake up! I shook Kenny's body, who was sleeping sloppily in his clothes from the night before, to wake him up.
Moo, what is it? I was up late last night. Let me sleep.
No, I'm not letting you sleep. What do you think you're doing? This time, I couldn't forgive him. I forced Kenny awake and demanded an explanation for what happened last night. But despite my anger, Kenny just yawned, sat up, and lazily scratched his head.
Like I told you yesterday, it couldn't be helped. It was work.
Work? You call ditching our plans to party at a club work?
Quit nagging. I married a boring woman like you, so don't get on my case just because I have a little fun.
Kenny's self-centered attitude, as if he was proud of his behavior, left me sighing in disbelief.
What's with that attitude? I could leave you anytime, you know, but if we divorce, a dull woman like you will never get married again.
Kenny said, looking down on me, with a smug smile on his face. Why did I ever marry this man? Even though I regretted it, I'd loved him so much since college. He was also there to support me when my dad passed away. Even though Kenny was like a completely different person now, I found myself hoping he would return to being the kind man he once was. With work being so hectic, I let things slide with Kenny's behavior. But that only led to another incident. Misunderstanding my leniency as weakness, Kenny took his actions to an even more shocking level. One day, on my day off, I was catching up on some paperwork at home. As I was sorting through the mail, one envelope caught my eye. It was the statement for a credit card that Kenny and I shared. I rarely used the card because of my busy schedule, but I opened it and was stunned. What is this? What's going on? The statement was filled with outrageously high charges. The charges were so absurd that I suspected fraud, so I immediately contacted the credit card company. However, after their investigation, they told me there were no signs of fraud and suggested that maybe a family member had used the card without telling me. When I asked for the details of the charges, they told me they were all made at high-end brand stores and boutiques. The only other person who could have used this card was Kenny. When Kenny returned home, I confronted him about the card, and to my shock, he casually admitted to using it.
I'm the executive vice president. I have a certain status, and I need money for my connections.
Apparently, these connections were gifts for women in the nightlife industry. What you're doing is betraying me. Do you even understand that?
Betrayal? That's an exaggeration. This is all part of the job.
Seeing Kenny's shameless attitude to keep repeating ridiculous claims, whatever love I had left for him was fading fast. Then came the event that completely shattered our marriage. About 6 months after the credit card incident, one weekend, Kenny and I were actually relaxing together in our living room, which was rare. Kenny was flipping through a travel magazine. Out of curiosity, I glanced over, and it had a feature on a luxury cruise ship. How beautiful. Oh, there's a cruise leaving from New York next month. I'd love to go someday. When I said that, Kenny snorted mockingly for some reason.
You, with your busy schedule, it's impossible.
Well, that's true, but the cruise was a week-long trip departing from New York, making stops at international ports. Given my work, it was unrealistic for me to join. But Kenny's attitude made it clear that he had no intention of going anywhere with me in the first place. About a month later, Kenny suddenly disappeared. Kenny left the house saying he was going on a business trip, but then I couldn't get in touch with him at all. Normally, I'd be worried that he might have been in an accident, but since he had packed his things properly before heading out, I knew this was a planned outing. No one at the company knew where Kenny had gone, and I was at a loss. If he had disappeared intentionally, it was beyond irresponsible. The employee's reaction to Kenny's sudden disappearance was unexpected. Since I usually kept out of HR matters, I hadn't known this, but apparently, Kenny's reputation in the company had taken a serious nosedive recently. Kenny had been acting high-handed, and sometimes even taking credit for others' achievements.
I hope he never comes back.
Hearing this kind of talk from our employees made me feel guilty for letting Kenny's behavior slide for so long. But first and foremost, I had to find out where he was. Just as I was thinking that, I finally got a message from Kenny himself. It wasn't a phone call, but a message on WhatsApp, with some unbelievable text and a photo attached. The photo showed Kenny smiling, taking a selfie in front of a luxury cruise ship. Unbelievable. What is this? To get an explanation, I immediately called him. He picked up right away, and it was clear from his tone that he was quite drunk and in high spirits.
Oh, hey, Emily, I'm spending $40,000 on the cruise, so cover that, okay?
What do you mean by a cruise? And $40,000? What are you thinking?
It's obvious it'd cost that much after paying the fees, right? This ship is amazing. It's got facilities like a luxury hotel and even a shopping mall inside.
Not only did Kenny feel no guilt about leaving without saying anything, but now he was demanding that I pay for his extravagant trip. Suddenly realizing what had happened, I checked my credit card, only to find it had already been taken by Kenny. Having canceled the shared credit card after the last incident had come back to bite me, Kenny had the audacity to steal my card. His arrogance had been unbearable for a long time, but this time, I couldn't forgive him. I couldn't tolerate Kenny's outrageous behavior any longer. While Kenny rambled on, praising the cruise, I used the landline to call the credit card company immediately. It was to ensure the card Kenny had taken could no longer be used. I just canceled the card, and we're getting a divorce.
Quit joking around. You wouldn't divorce me, would you? If anyone's leaving anyone, it'd be me.
Even at this point, Kenny still thought divorce was impossible and believed he was above me. If that's what he wants to think, then let him. I would take the necessary steps to ensure there were consequences for Kenny while he was away. Just so you know, I warned you.
Huh? Warn me about what?
That was my final warning, and I ignored Kenny's question and hung up on him. I had no reason to talk to this man any longer. It was only a matter of time before Kenny would panic and beg for my forgiveness. A few days later, as expected, Kenny called me, fuming.
Why can't I use the card?
I told you back then, didn't I? I canceled the card. On the luxury cruise Kenny boarded, all on-board services had to be paid in a lump sum upon disembarkation, using the boarding pass given at the time of boarding. According to Kenny, when he tried to settle the bill before leaving the ship with his credit card, it had been deactivated.
This joke has gone too far. How dare you humiliate your husband like this?
I warned you, didn't I? You decided to go on a trip and splurge without consulting me. This is your own fault.
Cut it out. Reactivate the card right now, or I'll divorce you.
Go ahead, I don't mind. I've put up with enough just because I once loved you, but I have no interest in staying married to someone like you. Apparently, Kenny was currently being held at the cruise line office.
If this keeps up, they'll hand me over to the police for non-payment. Are you okay with that? Just say you'll pay.
With that, Kenny handed the phone over to someone from the cruise company. Hello, the man there has nothing to do with me, so do as you please with him.
Why, you traitor?
As I coldly told them this, I could hear Kenny screaming in the background. I hung up the phone, having no reason to spend any more time on a stranger. I didn't care what happened to Kenny after this. Let him suffer the consequences of betraying his wife, I thought to myself. In the end, Kenny managed to avoid being handed over to the police, but it seems he was forced to work for free at the cruise company. But the amount he had spent was $40,000, a huge sum. There was no way he could pay that off by working just a little. Kenny managed to negotiate to work for free for a month as an advance payment, and promised to pay the rest in installments, which finally allowed him to leave the ship. Kenny then headed straight to see me at the office.
You humiliated me, you heartless woman. Do you know why I married you in the first place? If I can't use your money, then we're getting divorced.
He was clearly furious. I see. So you married me just for the money?
Obviously. Did you just figure that out now? How slow can you be?
I had known the truth for a long time, even without Kenny saying it. Kenny must have known my family was wealthy from the moment we started dating. So at first, he pretended to be supportive, but once his position was secure, he revealed his true arrogant nature.
Are you really okay with divorcing me? If you do, you'll end up leading a miserable, lonely life forever.
Kenny tried to threaten me by shoving divorce papers at me, but I just scoffed at him. I wasn't the same person I used to be. I had no desire to stay married, just to be ridiculed like this. You really don't listen, do you? I told you, we're already divorced.
Huh? Are you still joking around? I haven't signed any divorce papers.
Oh, you know those divorce papers you always used to threaten me with. They were already signed, so the process went smoothly. Kenny had been threatening me with divorce papers for ages, using them as leverage every time we fought. I'd secretly kept those papers.
There's no way you'd leave me. You're still head over heels for me.
What are you talking about? Sure, I loved you once, but that was a long time ago. Any love I had for you is long gone. I said this coldly, but Kenny still insisted that I had feelings for him.
If you divorce me, no man will marry someone as plain and old as you, no matter how rich you are as a CEO.
You can only judge people by their status, can't you? Sure, compared to other men your age, you might be more attractive, but inside, you're nothing but trash.
Trash? What do you mean?
Oh, you weren't aware of it. I don't know what else to call a man who betrayed his wife and went on a cruise with his mistress, other than trash. Kenny's face turned pale in an instant at my words. Oh, that reaction. Did you really think I hadn't found out? How naive. With that, I presented something I had obtained in advance. It was a photo of Kenny walking down the street with his mistress, looking quite affectionate. I'd suspected Kenny of cheating for a while, so I'd hired a private investigator to gather evidence. And after the recent incident, I'd contacted the cruise company and found out Kenny had been accompanied by a woman. It must have been his mistress, the hostess from the club he frequented in the name of business. That was the identity of Kenny's mistress. He must have wanted to impress her, so he planned the luxury cruise trip, but in the end, it must have become a bitter memory for both of them. Because Kenny showed off and splurged for his mistress, he ended up with a $40,000 bill. As a result, both of them had to work for free to pay off the debt, and Kenny's pride as a man was utterly shattered. It was a pity I couldn't see the scene up close, but I imagined it must have been quite a sight. You'll pay the price for humiliating me all this time. I'll be seeking compensation from both you and your mistress.
There's no way I'm paying alimony. If you push this, I'll tell everyone at the office that you forced a divorce on me.
Feel free to do that. You might not have realized it, but it seems you weren't very well liked at the office. While you were gone, all the employees said they were relieved you weren't around.
No way. I'm the executive vice president.
What are you misunderstanding? You only got that position because you were my husband, and I've heard that all your past accomplishments were just stealing credit from others. How can you even call yourself an executive? The internal audit had confirmed that Kenny's supposed achievements had actually belonged to other employees. That alone would be enough grounds for dismissal, but Kenny had done something even worse. While you were away, I had the time to look into things thoroughly. It seems you were up to quite a lot behind my back. During Kenny's absence, I'd uncovered evidence of a crime. Kenny had embezzled money from the company. Wasn't it your mistress who encouraged you to embezzle?
How do you know that?
Kenny's face turned blue in an instant. It seemed my accusation had hit the mark. Kenny had thought of his mistress as just a club hostess, but in reality, she was an employee of a rival company. The private investigator I'd hired had found this out, but Kenny had been completely unaware. The mistress had been trying to get sensitive company information out of Kenny. But luckily, Kenny was an incompetent executive in name only. No one around him trusted him with important work, so the mistress must have been frustrated at not getting any valuable information. Unaware of any of this, Kenny kept on lavishing her with gifts and even took her on that luxury cruise. Even after hearing what I said, Kenny desperately denied it. He hurriedly tried to contact his mistress, but she had already changed her number, and no matter how long he waited, the call didn't go through. Oh dear, you two worked together on the cruise, and now she's dumped you just like that. Poor handsome guy. Unable to even retort to my sarcasm, the desperate Kenny smashed his phone to the ground in anger, breaking it. Are we done here? You're already a stranger to me. Get out of here right now, and don't even think about coming back to the house.
Wait a minute. I'm the executive vice president.
You can't possibly still be an executive vice president after the divorce. Of course, you're fired.
No, wait. You're misunderstanding. I'm a victim too.
Even though it was already too late, Kenny seemed to have finally realized he was losing everything, and he suddenly began to apologize.
That woman tricked me into it. I never wanted to embezzle in the first place.
Seeing my ex-husband shamelessly making excuses, I felt not an ounce of sympathy. Instead, I felt nothing but disgust and anger. After all the selfish things you've done, you have the nerve to say it's not your fault. Just because you were deceived doesn't mean your crimes are erased.
What am I supposed to do now? I still owe for the cruise.
You should work honestly from now on. You've been living way beyond your means. You need to understand the value of the money you were spending like water.
You heartless woman, we were married for years, and you have no compassion at all.
You were the one who betrayed me first. I'm done talking. Get out now, or I'll call security. At my firm words, Kenny finally seemed to realize it was over and slipped as he left the room. After being fired from the company and thrown out of the house, Kenny apparently went crying to his parents, but having heard the whole story from me, his parents disowned him and told him never to set foot in their home again. Abandoned by his family with nowhere to turn, Kenny still had to find a way to pay off the cruise debt and the alimony I demanded. Kenny's reputation as a womanizer had spread even to other companies, and when he tried to find a job in the same industry, every company turned him away at the door. Desperate for money, Kenny foolishly took out loans from a payday loan company. But before long, he was unable to make ends meet. And when the payday loan company found out he had no way to repay the loans, Kenny was forced into a shady job. That job was working on a fishing boat, one that wouldn't return to shore for months. A cruel irony, turning his luxury cruise into hard labor on a ship. Kenny, who had never done physical labor in his life, was struggling greatly.
Why did this have to happen to me?
No amount of complaints would reduce his debt. The once handsome Kenny, who used to be so popular, had become almost unrecognizable, with his skin sunburned and covered in spots. With Kenny gone from the company, not only I but everyone else finally had some peace. I apologized to my employees for leaving my husband unchecked while being so busy with work. They comforted me, saying it wasn't my fault, but I felt deeply regretful for my poor judgment of character. As a gesture of goodwill, I decided that the annual company trip would be a domestic cruise this year. On board, we shared stories of how terrible Kenny had been, and it felt like the bond among us grew even stronger, as if the challenges had only solidified our unity. Despite the divorce and embezzlement scandal, thanks to my employees, the company was thriving. Though I lacked judgment in choosing a partner, I felt incredibly fortunate to be surrounded by such valuable employees. For the sake of everyone supporting me, I vowed to work even harder in the future. That's what I promised myself.